Chip.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Let's intend we all learn a lot this evening. That's always a good way to start. And we had wonderful energy, music, and I asked John and Tiffany to play some music and open it up because to balance our brain waves, to get us out of logical thinking and analyzing and figuring everything out. And, you know, we've learned a lot this weekend so far, and we're only halfway through. And one of the things I hope you noticed is how everything segues into everything else. And how each person that's presented, I've listened to everyone or parts of everyone, how each of us has come from our own perspective. And, you know, you all come here and, you know, take time out of your life, your energy, your money to listen to a few of us who may be pioneers, maybe on the cutting edge. And what I want to emphasize is that my own journey when I started, I guess when I was born, when I was really young, that's when I started. When I was really young, I always knew that something was missing. And I'm sure some of the things I'm going to share with you tonight from my own perspective of how I ended up here on this stage, they're similar. We all have very similar experiences, and basically what it comes down to is how we interpret them and what meaning we assign to what's happening and how willing we are to think for ourselves rather than to be afraid to say, well, you know, I don't see it that way. And that's one of our biggest challenges in life for everyone. And we have to overcome a certain amount of fear in order to say, gee, I see that differently than you do, and then not only to say it, but then to live your life according to what's going on inside. So from the time I was very young, I couldn't figure out how I got here. I was born in upstate New York, small town. I was a village girl, like my mother, like her mother, Polish ancestry. And it boggled me, even though I couldn't articulate it, that I lived in such ordinary circumstances. And that I was Catholic and Polish, and my father worked, and my mother was a housewife, and my older brother had Down syndrome, so that marked us right away as a different family. And so I grew up with that, and knowing that some big things were missing. And I was a good student in school if I felt like it. So I learned, you know, to not perform because someone wanted me to, but if I felt like it. And, you know, as the years went on, I felt like it less and less because, as you all know, you know, as we grow and start to conform to this whole mind control conditioning of education, what happens is we have to fit in these little slots in order to get accredited or acknowledged or approved. And so that's another way that we stop being true to ourselves and we start conforming. Today, because we're living in such an extraordinarily mediated world, and media can be addicting. Anything can be addicting. Addiction is just a pattern. It's just a rut that we fall into, and it becomes familiar. And if it's a rut that involves trancing out or sort of dissociating from being present and conscious, then it's easy to take those kind of routes. And when you're on a spiritual path, pardon me, those tests are going to come up all the time. That's life. That's life. So I knew I was different, and I didn't know how different, because I could fit. I could play the game. I was always popular. I was always in on everything. You know, I could lead. I had good ideas. I always was an instigator. That was my father's nickname for me. And yet I fit nowhere. I fit nowhere because even before I understood psychic energy, I could look ahead and plot and plan and see, well, this is going to go to a dead end, and this is going to go to a dead end, and this is going to go to a dead end. A dead end to me at that time meaning that I wasn't here to get married, have kids, settle down and have a job and maybe have 2 weeks vacation a year, which was, you know, where the lemmings were headed, pretty much. It's a way of controlling society. It's a way of controlling behavior to get people to conform and do certain things and keep up certain ideas. Those ideas don't have to be real. They don't have to be real at all. So I learned how to play the game, and then in the infamous 60s, I was right there in upstate New York doing my own version of the 60s, and probably my first feeling of, okay, this is an okay place and I think I'll stay here, and there's something more to learn. I was in college and I was working my way through college, and so I was waitressing, and a friend at that time, it might have been 68, Summer of Love, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, here I have this substance. Do you want to take it?" And I said, "What is it?" And she said it was mescaline or something like this. I was clueless. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I said, "Well, what's it going to do?" And she said, "Well, you'll see cartoons and stuff come out of the wall and things like that." So, and I trusted this girl. She grew up in the same village I did, but she was just wilder than I was. I was the wild thinker, but she was the wild doer. I was always a little more conservative because I had strict parents. And strict parents can be very effective. Sometimes we grow up and we have anger for our strict parents because they made boundaries. But if we don't have boundaries and we're not taught certain things and we don't have caution, then we don't understand what we're getting into. So my parents lurked behind me in some way. But I still broke the rules. So I took this substance, mescaline, and it was, for me, the first time I was really comfortable in my skin. And the answer that I got was, how did I get here? What am I doing here? What's missing? And what really came through on that beautiful summer evening, it was probably June or July, upstate New York, Lake George, New York, in the Adirondacks, was that everything is alive. Everything is alive. That's what I knew. Just like that. I saw it, I felt it, and I laughed the whole evening. I couldn't stop laughing because it was so joyous to me, because everything before that was empty. Years of, you're meaningless, you're sins, you're flawed, all this programming that was just my experience. Think about everybody else's experience of family beliefs, traditions, societies conforming. So that was the 60s. And at the time, I didn't know anything about astrology. I was, 20 years old or something like that. And I didn't start studying astrology actually till 20 years later, just after I started channeling. It was one of the few suggestions that the Pleiadians gave me early on to, study astrology and work with a crystal. They said, hold a crystal. I have one in this bag, or a big Herkimer diamond, when I channel them. And I've always been sort of a person who makes her own decisions, and I don't like to feel that anyone's holding me hostage or leveraging me in any way. So when I first started channeling the Pleiadians, I wasn't ready to jump onto everything that they said at all. Not at all. But I did. I got a nice crystal from Herkimer. I grew up 13 miles from Herkimer, New York, which is a bed of crystals, double terminated. They're called diamonds. And of course, it's old Indian territory, Iroquois, and that. And because I've learned that the land does teach us, the land where we're born, and that there's a significance to where we're born and why we choose that area, because we're walking again in our old shoes. We do go back. And there's things that we know from other times that are in the ground. And sometimes we don't access those things consciously or really know what we're doing, but each of us is always walking a timeline. We're always sort of fulfilling some inner desire to be more of who we are, because we're born with a purpose, and we give ourselves that purpose. That's very obvious. And so when I was younger, I was looking for that purpose because I felt it inside, but there was no career, there was no anything in the world that interested me, because I felt that I could see the corruption, I could see how people were dishonest, I could see how people were greedy, all they wanted was money, they would do anything for money, or they wanted to work all the time, or they would mindlessly have families and not know what they were doing and not understand the importance of being a parent and how you can affect a child for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. So there wasn't a slot for me. So I decided after I finished school, I studied history. It's still a passion of mine, and I will, if I get to it tonight, talk a little bit more about what we need to know about history, what's not taught in school, and certainly what's not on the 6 o'clock news. So this psychedelic experience was the first of many. And in retrospect now, I see that I was very brave. I was very naive. I had a core of trust inside myself, and I had an excitement that was looking for knowledge. So those things were my intentions without even knowing the word or the concept at the time. So what those feelings did was they conditioned the space around which I journeyed into, okay? And other people would stand next to me or hang out with me and journey in the same space, supposedly, and not have at all the same experience. And so I could see that early on. And I could see that the people who had very disturbing outward behavioral patterns that at that time I had no context for at all. Now today I see it comes from family trauma, incest, sexual abuse, who knows, I mean, the worst end, cult activity, government interference, mind control, you name it, you know, and then cultural family bloodline stuff, reincarnational dramas. So all this stuff we carry inside of us very casually, you know, just very casually, because if we carried it consciously, we'd freak out. We would. Yet it's all there. And this is what we're here to heal in this time. We're here to heal all this. And this is what comes up when people start going deeper. So in the 60s, that's what I saw. And of course, later on, studying astrology, I saw that there was a major event happening, you know, Uranus, planet Uranus, which brings sudden, shocking, surprising changes and revolution, was making an aspect that astrologers call a conjunction, and it was conjuncting Pluto, the transformer. And so anyone who would have understood astrology would have known that, wow, around 65, 66, 67, the lid's going to be blown off of society. Now, I didn't know any of this, so I was a participant in the energy, and then I conditioned the energy to suit my own needs, which were always a person who was seeking, who wanted to figure out how I got here, what the real rules were, and what's all the hidden stuff, what's really going on. So the revolution took hold in the 60s in a major way. And everyone here in this room pretty much was born, you know, after that, before that time. Few of you were born right around that time. Very powerful to be born in 65, 66, 67, because these people will be, again, Daniel Pinchback fits into this category, I believe, will be leaders that will be very, very triggered in 2010, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. Because there's cycles, these things start off, it's like a moon, you know, we can watch the moon cycles. We can say, oh, look, it's dark, it's the new moon, and then we see the first crescent, and then it goes to the first quarter, and then we go to the full, and then we go to the receding end. And these cycles show us something. Women bleed with the moon in general. People bleed much more when they have an operation at the full moon. You never want to have, you know, any kind of surgery or anything like that at the full moon. The tides are higher at the moons, and so our bodies change. Look at hospital and emergency rooms are always, you know, crazier at that time. The police will say there's more activity at that time. There can be more battering, more brutality, more craziness, this kind of thing. So it's not just the moon that creates these cycles, that all the planets make aspects with each other, and they have cycles. And this is some of the oldest teachings that I've learned in traveling around the planet and leading sacred site groups and studying alternative history. And it's nothing that is ever brought up in any kind of educational institution or classes that I ever took. It's not even factored in. Yet if you understand the cycles that the planets make and how they affect us as simply sort of, I call it cosmic weather, all right? It's like when a cosmic event is happening, it makes weather, it makes psychic energy, and it brings out something. So in the 60s, many of us were responding from what was happening inside, yet many years later, in studying and learning, I saw, you know, that another version of what was happening is that intelligence organizations were plotting and planning events where they could condition that revolution that was happening, that transformative revolution, where literally almost overnight we broke away from our parents' values, okay? That's how we experienced it. And yet now in retrospect, I see it was a lot of it was part of behavioral modification, deep cover projects that were designed to steer us at that time in certain directions. I think someone brought up today that how during the 50s, and of course always through shamanic aspects, that things, substances from the living library, or even chemical combinations such as LSD or mescaline, were used in a therapeutic aspect where people got in touch, like I did totally spontaneously, unexpectedly, and saw that we were connected to something that was vibrant, that interacted with us. And yet, when we left that state of consciousness and our brain waves went back to the familiar pattern, identity, costume of who we think we are, we could remember something great, but our perceptions weren't there anymore. And that was, you know, for me, a major frustration. It was like this accordion effect, you know. And what's happened over the years is that what I used to see and feel is so much more raw. It's so much more available now in regular everyday life. Everything is more activated. And for many reasons, from stellar effects, galactic effects, from people pioneering new ways of thinking on their own, all by themselves, figuring it out all by themselves, having the will and the desire to step out of the box, to validate personal experiences, to, you know, go through our own personal stargates, to step through time. So, you know, my experiences along that line really made a major difference for me. For the time when I started channeling the Pleiadians. So 10 years after that, in the late 70s, I was living in Southern California, going through a bit of a crisis. I was 29 years old, and now I know in retrospect that in astrology, everyone goes through a big grow-up, difficult, major, life-slamming, get off my lap kind of situation. And so we do go through crisis. It's another cycle. It's the Saturn cycle. Saturn returns to the place it was when we were born, for everybody, around 29 years old. So it says, grow up, take this energy of maturation, and it's difficult. And so I was going through one of those. And so it precipitated me into a state of depression, which was totally unfamiliar to my personality. And I remember feeling so down and so helpless and so listless and so what's the point, you know? And I think sometimes we go through these things just to really relate to being human, to understand, as the Pleiadians would say, the whole 2-mile-long piano of emotions that really make us what we are and that attract all these beings from all the different dimensions to come here because we have something that others don't have in that capacity. And those emotions have endless possibility for destruction or total enlightenment. So I responded to that energy, and I started seeking. And at that time, I came across the Seth material, which was channeled by Jane Roberts. And I also started studying Hatha Yoga, both of which really, at that age, 28 and 29, we all start building a foundation. Some people build a house. Some people start a business. Some people, you know, build a family, get married, have their first baby. But there's always something for everyone that they start building on at that age, and it starts to determine what you're going to do for the next other cycles of life. So when I started reading the Seth material, someone recommended it, and I gave it to my sister first, because I was too busy with other things, and she wrote me back and she said, "Thank you so much for giving me the secrets that unlocked my mind." And I was like, what the heck did she read that I gave her? So I rushed out and got a copy for myself, and I opened it up, and Seth's message is, you create your own reality. And I knew that that was like the key little instruction, that all my searching till that time, it was the key thing that was missing, that affirmation that said, you're the creator. For good or for ill, you're the creator. And it resonated with me so deeply because I knew I could think of things in my life, good and not good, that I energized and thought of, and then they happened. So for me, all this was like personal experience. And throughout all these years, I longed for a teacher. I wished that someone would show up that would be my guru or my mentor or my teacher, and no one ever did. So I kept looking, and through the Seth material, I integrated that as best I could, reading, studying, applying, accepting responsibility, healing, definitely healing, doing a lot of healing. And so that was my foundation of sort of salvation, or my ladder that helped me climb up out of this state of despair. What's the point? And it was a hard ladder because it said, hey, this state of despair that you've been in, you're responsible for it. These people didn't do this to you. It was a collective, collaborative agreement. It's a big step. But I gladly took it because it set me free. And so that started the ball rolling with lots of stuff. I had my first regression during those years. I didn't know what I was getting into. Someone said, "Oh, they're doing regressions over there." It was I think at Asilomar, up on the Monterey Peninsula. I was at a conference, and someone was doing regressions, and a nice guy was sitting out outside, and he was just taking people and wasn't charging any money. He just wanted to turn them on. And so I sat down, and he put his hands on my back, and it was my first time, and he took me back, in my mind, and I didn't know what I was really doing. But don't forget, I'd already been a mind traveler, so my mind and my imagination had been exercised tremendously. And so I saw myself, living, maybe in the 1200s in France or England, one of those two, I wasn't sure even then. Simple. And my husband was gone. He had joined the Crusades. So we looked at the frustration of the life, and then this wonderful, wonderful man who I have no idea who he is, but he took me, and probably everyone else, he said, okay, now go to the point of your death. And then he had me dying. He said, what's happening? I said, I'm really sick, and I'm dying, and there's nobody here with me, and there's nobody here to help me. And it's so wonderful, the psyche and what the mind does. And so he took me back to a core wound that would be a collective wound and an experience that we've all had, that we die, and we die alone, and we die in pain, and we die abandoned, and something's not resolved. My husband's gone someplace, and who knows where he is on the Crusades. And there I am dying young. I mean, I was in my 30s or something, dying young from this disease, whatever I got. And so what he did, he was brilliant. This is my first one, and I had many, many regressions since, and some very wonderful ones with Dr. Snow. And so this man, he took me to my death, and then he got in touch with my core angst, and he said, but you're not alone. Look, we're there. We're looking from now. And I went, yeah. She thinks she's alone, but she's not alone. Because I'm right here, and this guy's right here too. Totally switched my paradigm. And then he took me through this death process, and then he said, okay, now you're out, and you're free, and you can feel yourself. And it was one of the biggest and most simple gifts I ever had. It was totally spontaneous that I did this, but it was my psyche and the synchronicity of the times, and it was more fulfilling my plan, my core plan of I want to know why I'm here and what the purpose is and how I can live joyfully. So that was a key event. It was a key event because it opened me, and I've learned in my personal experience that when I open, and I have an aha, whether I tell anyone about it or not, it doesn't make any difference. It's in my energetic field. And so if I walk through a mall or if I'm walking through the woods, it doesn't make any difference. That energy is being sent out. And then the people I may share the story with, because I learn from stories, and I learn from telling stories, and then people giving me feedback on stories. The people get excited, or I get their feedback, and then new possibilities open. And this is what we're all doing. This is what you've been doing all weekend as you've been listening to everyone talk. It looks like the presenter's doing something. But you see, everybody's sitting here in the room thinking, analyzing, feeling, getting ideas. We're building a grid. And there's nothing that can supersede the power of the mind. So anyways, so that's about 1978. And then I went on a search, but it was more grounded. I had yoga. I really believe that if you want to know how to manage the energy of these times, you work with your spine. Work with your spine. Keep your spine straight. Stretch it. Find some way to, get it adjusted. And chiropractic's fabulous, but you don't want to depend on someone else all the time to have to put you in shape. The body is totally flexible. Your body will come back from almost anything. It's just remarkable because it's not just your body, it's the will that says, hey, I want to be able to do this. I picture myself as being flexible and smooth, and energy just runs through me. And so as you make an agreement with your body that that's what you want, and you use your imagination to make that picture, what happens is your spine gets activated. You learn how to use the cranial sacral fluid. The chakras, are working. They don't have the old stuff in them. They have new energy coming in, and it's easier to navigate the crazy energy of these days. So that's number one. Take care of your spine. It's good to rock in the morning, get down, loosen up your spine, stretch your spine, but definitely work with your spine, okay? That's really important. So yoga helped me ground. It helped me understand, connect my whole body. It also helped me stay healthy because I used to sprain wrists and ankles and sometimes like that, and I never did after that. I just got really strong and just really, 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 really flexible. And I still have that flexibility. I'm not a fanatic at all in any way, but I could easily, roll around the stage and do somersaults for you. It's just because I'll never lose it, because I'll always have it and I'll always do it, and that's my agreement with my body. But I find that too many people don't make agreements with their body. They think the doctor or science defines what the body is. It's not the case at all. That's the miscued paradigm. That's where we've all really lost track. Anyways, so 1988 rolls around, and here it is. I'm in another crisis. Not as big as 1978, because Saturn makes us depressed. And again, 28, 29, it's kind of a heavy time. But 39, 40, whole different energy. It's called Uranus opposition. And what happens for all of us is that the planet Uranus moves halfway around the zodiac, and it goes to be exactly opposite where it is when we're born. And that tends to, in astrological terms, some people call it fires the kundalini. And it means that, it sort of awakens energy that's stored at the base of the spine, and then that energy can come up and it can make you crazy. It can make divorces, many people split up, people go through a major crisis between 39, 40, and 41. And basically what we're doing is we're taking whatever we did at 28, 29, we're applying it. We have to learn that lesson and say, can I build on this, or is this more destructive? And you see, if we understand that we're all in these cycles, and they're cycles of initiation and maturation. Yes, the cycle has to do with jobs and family and love life and all that, but that's just the outpicturing of it. It's all about energy. And it's all about what we do with that energy and what we envision for ourselves about what we think we can be. So I was restless, and that's very typical of Uranus opposite Uranus, 39 years old, very restless. Selling real estate at the time. I'd moved to North Carolina. I settled into that because I didn't know still what to be. And it did me well because I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of stuff. But anyways, I was restless, and so I manifested following some desires. And I went to Egypt and Greece on a journey with many other people, and a trance channel was leading it, and I just knew I always had to go there. It was in my blood. It was in my plan. And at the end of that trip, that's when I started channeling the Pleiadians. It was the very end of the trip. I had visited Delphi, which is an oracular site, a few hours outside of Athens. And when I got to Delphi, I was just stunned. I'd studied history. I knew a little bit, traveled around the world, been to Greece already before this, and I'd never heard of this. And it was remarkable because as I walked into Delphi, I recognized it. And I couldn't go any further. I just sat there with the whole complex behind me. If any of you know it, it's just this fabulous, fabulous ruins of stone. And I sat in the early entry part and just looking out in this beautiful amphitheater because I said, wow, I know this. I've been here many times before. And I started, I started crying, I had the tears. And the tears often, what happens is that when we break through. I didn't know all this then. I mean, this is all, I'm giving the experiences and then the retrospect. The retrospect is that when we cross something and we encounter something that's very profound, and our conscious mind, or what yesterday I talked about, the garden of the mind, and how the Pleiadians have renamed the mind through vegetables, because they're easier to remember in some way. So when I talked about the conscious mind, the P's named it the pea, because the conscious mind is very little like a pea. And they say that it wants to know everything and do everything, and it's the one that looks out and says, okay, what's this, what's this, what's this? But so much more is going on in what they call the back garden. And so my conscious mind knew that I recognized this, but my body was having real cellular memory, so much so that I was shaking a little bit and I didn't want to move, and I was just entranced with looking at this environment and having tears come down my eyes, because even though I couldn't remember any of the details, I knew that I was home. I had crossed a home. And I had felt that previously in a trip to Europe many years before in a few places that I went to, but not of this stature. And it was more so even than I had encountered in Egypt, even though I had big encounters there. So the next day, I raced, so the rest of the tour took us through the Delphi. We had a thing there and we saw it and everything, and I really knew nothing about it. I had no idea of the oracles of Delphi, that they were the Pythia, that Apollo, the guys from, the Apollo guys, back then the Apollo guys, the God kings, the Christ kings at that time, the patriarchy took it over and convoluted what was happening. And so it took me a long time to figure all these things out, because it wasn't a priority, because the next day I started channeling. And it was real simple the way it started. I was saying goodbye to the people I've been traveling with. There were about 40 of us, and we were in a hotel. It's called the El Presidente Hotel in Athens, Greece. And just to back up a bit, when I had visited Greece after college, I took myself on a tour to Europe, because my parents didn't think it was important at all. They didn't even think it was important for a girl to go to school, okay? It was, this was mid-60s, okay? And I'm from the East Coast, and people are like, you don't have to do that. But I did. And I always knew that you had to go tour Europe after you had your education. That was the classical thing to do. That's obviously another lifetime memory, because it didn't fit with my stature and what I was doing at the time. But I did go to Europe then, and I went to Greece in '71, and I felt like, wow, I'm really home. So now I'm back there in '88, I'm at Delphi, and the day after I went to Delphi, I started channeling the Pleiadians. I'm saying goodbye to the people in the hotel bar, and people are saying, we'll see you again, and some are going off in different batches, and I found myself alone. I mean, not really alone, but alone. Like, no one said, come here with me or do this. I have found myself with vacant time, like, what am I going to do with this evening here that's ahead of me? And then suddenly I get this message in my head, and it says, go to your room and practice channeling. And so I'm not one to follow instructions, not like that. I mean, just because somebody says it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. That's the kind of person I am. So some reason I did, though, because there was nothing else going on. And my roommate said, I'm going dancing, and I thought, they're not going to ask me to go dancing too? They didn't. So I was left alone. So I had nothing else to do. And this voice said again, go to your room, practice channeling. Not that I knew what to do. I didn't know how to practice channeling. I had no idea. I read Jane Roberts. I'd seen people channel, but I had no idea what it was. I really didn't. So I went to my room and I practiced channeling. I locked the door. I closed the curtains. I was terrified that somebody might hear me talking to myself and know that my roommate was out, and that they would know, okay, that what's Barbara doing? She's by herself in the room. And I said to myself, I sat at the end of the bed. It was a twin bed. I sat on the floor, and I had my back to the bed, and I said, I intend to become a clear channel now. And then within a minute or two, I start whispering. I start talking. My mind's racing. What's going on? Part of me's going, what's going on? What's going on? But another part of me's talking. And so I had to teach myself to listen while I'm questioning what's coming through my lips. And there's nobody here to validate anything for me. And I'm still worried now that what if somebody walks by in the hall? All these thoughts are racing through my head. And then, the message comes in. It's so comforting. It's so soothing. It started explaining what the trip was about and what we were really doing and what was happening. And it kind of filled in the blanks for a lot of the information we didn't get on the trip, but I was feeling. And then about halfway through, you know, the voice said, we're the Pleiadians. And I probably went, inside, you know, but they just kept going because they had me in the space, and that's how it started. And then they finished, you know, and then within, I probably did it for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm guessing. And then within a little while later, half an hour later, my roommate comes back from dancing, so who knows how it could have been a big time distortion, I'm not even sure. And then I made the mistake, I think, of telling her, and then the cat was out of the bag, and from then on, I was a Pleiadian trance channel. So the next day I came down to breakfast, and everybody knows I'm a Pleiadian trance channel. And I was like, no, I don't know if that really happened. I mean, it happened, but I don't think I can, you know, I don't know. You know, I was really equivocating because I didn't understand it. And so people encouraged me. And I came home, my sister said, I said, Karen, you won't believe what happened. She goes, you started channeling. I was like, how do you know? My sister and I are like twins with different bodies, and, you know, we're not twins, but we're sisters, but we're very, very entrained and really read each other. So for us to understand psychic energy, it's been natural for us because we've always been very entrained and very empathetic and knowing, you know, on some levels what was going on. So that's how it began. And it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. Like most of things in life, you know, we project. We think, oh, this is what this is, or this is what this is. And it's not. It was hard. People encouraged me. And I looked always in the outside world for an affirmation, a sign. You know, I was savvy enough to understand the workings of metaphysics and the dynamics of body and some of those things. But my first 2 years, maybe first year and a half, was very difficult because the energy of the Pleiadians were coming in my body, and my Kundalini was rising. And so there was a meeting in my physical form, and so I would get like these backaches. And what was happening is the energy would get locked in my lower back because I was running all this energy through myself, even though I'd had many, you know, already over 10 years of yoga. So I started doing massage and chiropractic, and all these things were synchronistically led, you know, they were sort of put in front of me. And what happened is my body started getting stronger and more in tuned, and I was able to handle the energy, because I used to say in the early years, it's like steering, you know, a wild herd of Mustangs to have the P's come in and do this energy. And I'm sharing this with you because it's really important, because the energy that the Pleiadians represent, I think, is simply symptomatic of what we're going to see from this transformation that we're in, that we all have to be able to incorporate this kind of energy in our physical form. And so it's not just about learning about these things, whether it's ETs or Stargates or the mysteries and all the clues that are out there. We project on them what we think they are, and we think, oh, it might be an outside event, but the event's happening in all of us all the time. And if we pull in too much energy and we don't deal with the issues, unresolved issues that are frozen in time, then we get blocked energy. When we get blocked energy, we get big problems, we get sick. My experience has shown me that all illness stems from emotional blocked energy. So we can pull out all the little microscopes and stuff we want and look for the itziest bitsiest particles of germs and all this stuff, and spend all this time looking for cures and looking for all this stuff, and it has nothing to do with any of that. Why does it work for some people? Why does the placebo effect work? It's all about beliefs. Everything we do is about the agreement that we have to experience reality in a certain way. And sometimes people, they punish themselves and they say, oh, well, you know, if I'm a creator and I created this, then I must be doing something really bad. You know, it's kind of dualistic thinking. You know, I think of illness and my body or anything that happens in life as an ally. And that the world we live in is this mystical. And we keep looking for the mysticism because we think some religion or some ETs landing are going to explain it to us. But it's so obvious that it's with us. It's there in every single moment. And yet it's hard work to be present with it, especially in these times of acceleration. I think for those of you who were at my institute on Friday, sort of, you know, was before the conference from 2 to 5, and I gave a little model, and I'd like to reiterate that model again because it's been really important, and it's just a metaphor, as many of the things the Pleiadians have used to teach through me. But the metaphors sometimes are really simple, and if we get really complex, then we think the answers are in figuring out the complexity, and they're not. It's just about a perception. It's how we perceive it, each individually. And everyone's perceptions are different. But it's all the collective of those perceptions that want to see something else, that makes something else happen. So the Pleiadians have, when they came in and started channeling through me, it was 1988. It was May of 1988, actually May 18th, 1988, which I later learned, after I started studying astrology, was the day of the year, well, a few days of the year, when the sun is conjunct the Pleiades. And so that was kind of like, wow. I mean, I started channeling on the day the sun is lined up with the Pleiades. That's pretty interesting. I had no idea that that was going on. And it just kept unfolding. My life kept unfolding with these series of events that were connected and meaningful that at the time I had really no conscious awareness, no education to understand, the significance of them. So in the early years, the Pleiadians said, we're here because you're living, the awakening is happening. That was one of my first official channelings. It was called The Awakening. And very simply, they said, everything's going to change. And everything, you're here in this time of transformation. It's about the spiritual development of society, and everything in your lifetime is going to completely change. So I said, okay, I just hope I'm right on this because I'm sticking my neck out saying these big qualifiers. So, but I learned early on, I said to myself, okay, Barb, if you create your own reality, you created this. And if you created this, you have to, settle into it. You're either a creator or you're not a creator. So I accepted. I had to settle into what I created because it was some of it was way too far out for my already very far out thinking. Growing up and even in college, everyone knew I was the most far out thinker. I was able to think further out of the box than 90% of the people I knew. So the piece stretched me. And one of the models that they gave was that we were living in these times of acceleration, and they nicknamed this period from 1987 to 2012, they nicknamed it the nanosecond, just for convenience, because they said when we refer to it, we don't want to keep talking about da-da-da-da-da. So they just said, we'll call it the nanosecond. And they said the reason we're going to call it the nanosecond, which is a billionth of a second, is because from your perspective, it's 25 or 26 years. But from our perspective and many other perspectives, it goes by in the blink of an eye. It's that fast, and it's not that easy to find. So I'm like, okay. And they said, and it's divided into 3 phases. And this is your model so that you understand where you are. It was a map, so we can understand where we are within this process. And they said the first 10 years, from 1987 through 1996, the energy would accelerate tenfold each year. And then they called that phase 1. And then phase 2 began in 1996, right? 87? 87 and 96. 97 was a big turnaround point. Everything really shifted between 94, 95, 96. And also Pluto at that time moved into the sign of Sagittarius. So it would have opened another big, massive opening for everyone's consciousness on the planet. So phase 2, they called it, from 1997 through 2006, and they said the energy would accelerate 100-fold each year, and that you will see it outside yourself. Because what will happen is that everything starts to speed up inside, and you're going to be changing on a subatomic level. You're changing everything, your genes, everything changing is going to get all this energy and this light, and it's reprogramming people, and in the process, everybody's stuff's going to come up because everyone has to remember. They can't forget anymore. They can't be dissociative. And they remember a lot of stuff, and they're going to be attracted to everything across the lines of time. So that was phase 2, and they said that to look at the technology, that the technology that we build outside of ourselves would be a direct reflection, that what we would do as creatures is that in order to understand the energy that was affecting us, we would build things outside of ourselves to show ourselves what was really happening inside. So think back, if you can, to 1987, what kind of technology you had back then. What buttons were even available to push? And then think of phase 2, 97. You know, what started happening then? Internet got really big. Most people didn't even have a fax machine in 87. Internet started getting big in 97. And that 97, phase 2, would end in 2006 with another sort of punctuation mark, big punctuation mark astrologically. And at the end of 2006, what happened just a few nights before New Year's Eve was the planet Pluto aligned with the galactic center for the first time in 250 years. And it made 2 more alignments this year. And in looking at history and using astrology to look at history, and this is Western astrology, you can use almost any system you want. When you start looking for patterns and significances, there's many ways that you can find them. So that's a given. There's no one system that's more appropriate than another. Astrology works for me. I was guided to study it, and so I use it because it helps us to understand. So with a 250-year cycle, it's real simple. We jump back to the 1750s, and we can see what happened. Industrial revolution, the revolution all over the world, and was pointed out today that without that revolution, we wouldn't be in the revolution we're in now. So basically, December 28th of 06 was a very hot night, wherever you were. July 17th of this year, second pass to the galactic center. My mother got very ill 2 nights before, and we put her in the hospital, which is totally against my principles. But I knew when to surrender. And she got diagnosed with having bone cancer, and she also was in dementia. So, and they gave her a couple of months to live. And then 2 days later, the galactic center, Pluto was to the galactic center for the second time. And I went to see my mother in the hospital thinking she was going to be all flat out and really bad like she was 2 days before. And lo and behold, there she is, sitting up in bed, laughing. She's got my friends there, and kids, and they're all laughing. And I'm knowing this is the galactic center day, you know, and knowing that the galactic center represents something that's big that's missing from our planet, and that's the grace of the goddess. And that's what's missing in our society, that we're afraid to honor it. We're afraid to honor because the goddess brings life. And until we honor life from ourselves, then how can we expect all these ETs to come here and honor it too? We've got the life they want, but we don't even take care of it. Anyways, so I'm looking at my mother, and I'm just like overjoyed thinking, wow, this is really a blessing, you know. And I had done work with Chet and Calista and a group of people. We had gone to France and Malta earlier in the year around the solstice, summer solstice. And Malta, of course, very powerful place, and their goddess culture goes back a long, long ways, as many of them do. And one of the things the Pleiadian said, you know, when the goddess appears, she really is showing you about the value of life. And that's her message, to value life. And whether she's the skinny goddess, the slim goddess they call her, the Marian Christian goddess would be the slim goddess, or Isis would be the slim goddess, or the Egyptian goddesses would be the slim goddess. And then you look at the very ample, substantial goddess that you see from the longest of oldest times, and they represented, like, don't mess with me here. I've got the fertility, I've got the energy, and I'm grounding it into the earth. So I had all these wonderful teachings and sort of mystical experiences with the goddess. And there's my mother, you know, on her deathbed, laughing, and my friends are there entertaining her, and the kids are making her laugh. And my mother looks at my girlfriend, who looks a little bit like me, and she says, oh, look. She said, there's my mother. My mother's looking out from her. Well, my girlfriend doesn't look anything like my mother's mother. And I said, Mom, Karen has green eyes, and your mom had these bright blue eyes. And she said, oh, she's there. And for me, I knew that whatever my mother was able to consciously articulate, and she understands my work, I mean, she didn't study it, but she knows she's fully aware, my family is, of what I do, and they have never made me wrong for looking at reality in this way. They find it fascinating, and they've learned a lot from it. So I knew it was a transcendental experience for her and for me, to let me know that the goddess was going to be with her, and her mother was, on the journey of her death. And so that was the next month, the journey of her death. So at the second pass from Pluto to the galactic center, that was when I was given warning that, my galactic mother, my mother, would be leaving. And she died a month later, August 14th. I had the presence somehow, I don't know how, I do and I don't, of walking her over before she died. It was a very powerful experience. I walked her over out of frustration because I had been attempting to help her die for a long time, and okay, how can we get you out here? I said, all you have to do is you have to just leave your body. That's it. I said, you just unplug. All you have to do is leave your body. You're going to be fine. There's no problem. You're not going to go to any funky place. Got it all set up, You're going to go, just going to go. And she was frustrated because she couldn't get out. And so because she couldn't get out, I kept having to spend a lot of time with her and watching how horrifically difficult it has become for people to die. And they're showing us something. They're teaching us something. These are the not teachers. My mother didn't want to die this way. We intended that she could die in her sleep, easily. We had a relative that did that. She sat down and had lunch and then died in her sleep after lunch. And I always said, Mom, Albina did it. That's the way. You can get out, And yet, when it comes time to get out, this is going to be big frustration for everybody. Can we get out with grace? And do we know where to go when we get out? Because souls do get recycled. And if we don't clear up our unresolved issues, then we only end up plopping back into a simultaneous situation. We think of time as linear, and I say, refer to past lives and past experiences. But what the Pleiadians have taught me, and I've experienced it somewhat, not constantly, but I've had experiential knowing where time is really simultaneous. That, when I sit down and I channel and I do the Pleiadians, I know, that I started channeling the day after I visited Delphi because I was an oracle at Delphi. And we all do this. Everyone. I'm not special. I'm just sort of taking on a model to show everyone else how special life is for everybody. But we don't know how to look. So that's our big challenge, is to really learn how to look and assign meaning without making ourselves wrong, and looking for that really glorious, magical intelligence in life that connects us multidimensionally. And it's true that, what we believe is going to condition what we experience. And I was saying to someone during the course of the conference and chatting, I said, I've certainly been at many wolves' picnics. And what I mean is that, in my own naivete, I got involved in things or ended up being in situations where I realized, well, these people are pretending. And these people are like, either intelligence agents or military or cult people or whatever, and they think I don't know. But I know darn well what's going on. But here I am, got to pretend I don't know. And so one of the things I've learned is that we are thrown into very, very difficult situations. And just as my frustration with my mother and watching her suffer and not able to breathe and yet knowing there's a grace in this and that I'm meant to see this. And so out of frustration, I just put my hands on her, and in my mind I just said, Mom, come with me. And she started coughing and jiggling, and I took her hand and I said, I'm going to walk you over. And this is all quietly. My sister's packing stuff up and we're crying a little bit, and my sister doesn't really know what I'm doing, but she looks over and realizes I'm doing something. And my mother is fidgeting in the bed when I'm saying this, and I take her down. I take her down a path, and it's this really nice, beautiful stone winding path. And I get to the river, and I say, okay, you're going to go over the river because this is the simplest symbolism I can get you to get to the other side. I'm going to get you to your family, and then from there they'll take you to the rest. And so, and these are all old symbols, okay? They're very old symbols, and we operate by symbols and pictures. So I get her down to the river, and it's a raft, and she doesn't want to get on the raft. And in physical reality, she's coughing and she's jiggling. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to change it. Okay. So I brought her father there, and my father, and my uncle, who used to drive a boat and everything, and she totally settles in. And I make it a really beautiful boat, sort of the kind the Vikings went over in, when they put their dead in the boats and set them off to sea. Oh, she got on the boat. I got on with her. They took us over. They didn't say a word. They all looked like I remembered them from when they died. They looked old and, regular, not sick, but just old. And then I got her over to the other side, and lo and behold, there's her mother, my little Polish babci, grandma. She's standing there, and she's got her arms wide open. She's so happy to see my mother, and my mother's so happy to see her. And there's her two deceased sisters on either side, and they're all happy to see her. And then my grandmother says to her, I've got a surprise for you. And I'm still able to see through all this, and I'm just hanging out, and my mother's not dead yet, remember. We're just doing this energy exercise. And the reason I did the energy exercise, because one of the things that came to my mind when I was really frustrated and I didn't know how to help her die, was the Pleiadians had said to us at one time, they said, some of our work is really helping you to learn how to get out of here, how to die with grace. So I didn't know what else to do. So I did an energy exercise with her. So my grandmother says, come on, we got a surprise for you. So we go up a little hill, and for me it looks like a little hill, and there's a couple chairs there, and there's sort of primitive not crowns, but thrones, okay? Big backs and stuff, but very simple. And there's a being standing there, and he's radiating all this energy. And they bring my mother up to this being, and it's my brother who has Down syndrome, who died a long time ago. And I was shocked to the core, because he's a regular man emanating like this fantastic energy. And he comes and hugs my mother, and he says a code word to her, what he used to call her when he was young. He used to call her Mother Hubbard. And he says, Mother Hubbard. And I watch them melt into each other. And then, this is the first time I was told this story publicly, but it's important. Then he turns and he says, I want you to meet my wife. My brother was 15 when he died. And there's this beautiful dark-haired woman, and she comes up to my mother, and she kneels down, and she kisses my mother's hands. And then she gets up, and this is a sister of my mother that never came into body. And I get this whole thing about how my brother hardly ever comes into the body, but this wife of his, it's like I'm in the land of fairy. It's like I'm in a land of something that is so beautiful that I'm even privileged now to say that I went there, because I've gone back and it's all closed down. They won't let you in anymore. So what I really saw was absolutely phenomenal. And then I went back, and then here I am looking at my poor mom, and she's still struggling breathing. And it was just one of those real transcendental moments where, what's the reality? Which reality is real? Where she is here, hardly able to breathe, where people don't care, where they treat her like a sack of potatoes, and then we're in a really good facility, and people just come in and say anything they want to say, and I'm realizing, wow, these people are totally clueless to what's going on. It's just a job. This is primitive. This is just people collecting their hourly wage. And they don't realize all these people are in here having massive psychic experiences as they're ready to leave the planet. That's something we have to take care of. It's going to be one of our big duties in the future, to figure out, what to do about all this, and to honor the process and learn from it, and let our elders know they don't have to die in pain anymore. They don't have to teach us that anymore. Because when we get the lesson that we've forgotten so much, then we have to go through those hard ones. So my mother gave me a very, very big gift, as Chet said, and me gifting her by showing her the way, but who knows what came first, is the chicken or the egg. It was a collaboration of goddess energy. And we had our third pass with the Galactic Center, our final one, just a few weeks ago, October 26th, 27th, 28th. And that would open a window, a massive window of energy that everyone else has been talking about this weekend. And how's it going to come down? I don't know. How do you want it to come down? That's what it comes down to. How do you picture it? We have to learn to exercise our imagination. The only way that we are going to exercise our imagination is to pull away from technology. I do not mean turn your back on it, but we have to have a new technology that's simple, that people can understand, that is not messing up our minds, and that is not covertly built around secret technology that is not only designed to mess up our minds, but facilitate the energy frequency in such a way that non-physical entities can then enter our body very easily when we're on computers or any kind of this technology. That is a given that that's going on. And this is a huge, huge problem on the planet. Entity possession, non-physicals. This is the name of the game. Until we factor in the invisible energies that we cannot see, then we will never make progress with this planet. And I say that in all truth because it's real easy to vacate your body because of pain, because of lack of love, because of fear, because of sexual abuse, and worse, because of, being in a battle zone, being wounded. There's people that have done regressive work, and they have, discovered that, some of the people's ills that they were working with, when they regressed them, they found out that they had dozens of non-physicals attached to them. And one case stands out in particular, and this is very apropos for what's going on today and for our bloodline, is that a guy was a medic, and William Baldwin is the person who did this work, and he wrote a book called Healing Lost Souls. And in the work, he refers to a medic that he had worked with, and the poor guy had all kinds of ills and pains and stuff, and he didn't know what was wrong with him. Medical science couldn't find anything. So he went to hypnotherapy. And as Dr. Baldwin regressed him, I don't know if he was a doctor, but he was a hypnotherapist and a dentist, I believe. And as he was regressed, what happened is they found out that the man was carrying all his dead comrades. He was a medic, and he went to help them as they were dying, and as they would die in his arms, the regression therapist would say, well, why are you on this guy? And they'd say, well, we didn't know where to go. We were scared and we didn't know where to go, and it was comforting. So we went up in his arms and we went into him. He also found in his research that nurses tended to have more possessions than any other profession. So all of our caring and compassion is one thing, but if it leads to us facilitating entity possession or people, hitchhikers that are jumping on our fields, that we have no idea they're there because we are still glued to, really fixated on being entertained rather than being informed. And until we break the trance of technology, and if we don't break it, the Pleiadians say that it will be broken for us, and it's be real easy to break. One of the things the P's have said over the years, the sun is your best friend. And, in the 60s, when they started having everyone lather their self with, what do you call that stuff? Sunscreen and the SPFs or whatever they are, that's when the rate of skin cancer began to rise. And the more fear they put around the sun, well then of course, the more people then project their fear, and then they just manifest this stuff in one way or another. In actuality, I've always laid in the sun, I don't use anything. And the sun, it gives you health, it gives you vitality, but more than that, it gives you information. The Pleiadians said the sun is a governor ruler, but all suns and orbs are communication devices. So basically, energy is transmitted to our world, not only from the stars and the planets, but through the sun. So you can see in some very subversive way, not only did intelligence organizations want to co-opt the 60s by saying, well, we'll take your spiritual revolution here and we'll make a container for it so that we're going to control it. It's the same thing with the sun. Well, wow, we know because we're global elite or Illuminati or whatever term you want to use. We understand through time the power of the worship of the sun, and not necessarily the worship, but the reverence and the understanding of the sun. We've changed it into thinking it's sun worship. It's understanding that the sun is communicating, that you get information on the gamma rays and the other light frequencies, and that it changes planetary consciousness. And it's the sun that's heating up. It's the sun that's transmitting energy. And the global warming people know this on the highest levels. It's just another Ponzi scheme to manipulate people's behavior. Yes, we're having massive, massive changes on the planet, but I'm sorry, it's not the eco-fascism that's being sold to everyone. That's another big lie. We are in the midst of massive transformation. And we're living on something that's alive. And we're alive. And the earth feels us all the time. Years ago, the Pleiadian said, you know, why don't you give the earth a pat every day? Hi, earth. You know, whether you do it by hand or do it by eye. But, you know, the earth knows who you are, what we're doing. We're dealing with this. And so this is the next phase, because I'll jump back now. In their model for, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, they said the energy would accelerate 100,000-fold. So it goes 10-fold, 100-fold, and now this year, 100,000-fold. The galactic center alignments with Pluto, as small as Pluto is, as far away as the galactic center is, there is some relationship. You can see it throughout history as you track back about 250 years. Pluto was exact to the galactic center, I believe, in 1761, 1762. There was no acceleration of energy during those years. So it took a while for the American Revolution, French Revolution, all the things to take hold. And even though those were homegrown, spontaneous revolutions, they were still organized by secret societies. And secret societies basically are sort of pyramid organizations that the people at the bottom, you know the least, and the people at the top never give up what they know. And what do they know? They know the truth of the planet. They know what's here, who we cohabitat with, how we operate, the power of the sun. They know energy lines. They know everything, because in retrospect, all the wars have been started using astrology in modern times, in old times. So the global elite basically ridicule the information that is valid, and then behind the scenes use it to plan their events, and none of their events, from my perspective, are just materially oriented. They're all dealing with some sort of interdimensional manipulation of intent, and some of it is conscious, some of it is entity possession, some of it is beings that have run bloodlines for a long, long time. So how are we going to counteract all this? You know, what kind of mess do we find ourselves in? It's not hopeless. I've learned that. The grace of the goddess, the grace of the multiverse, the grace of everything is around us if we're willing to, you know, accept it and earn the right to consciousness. Consciousness is about paying attention. It's about listening. And we're never going to get galactic consciousness if we don't qualify for human consciousness. It's not like something's just going to come down and say, okay, all you people, you know, all your problems are over. You're going to see the big galactic multiverse. That's unfolding. For some people, you know, it's brilliant. But we all have to get on the same page with this. And the best way to get on that same page is to get in your body, own your space, and move from there. Disengage from any kind of activity that is lower vibrational. There's so much rise of pornography on the internet. I've never seen it because I just wouldn't even go there, but you know, everybody's writing about it all the time. And you look in the world, what's happening? What's happening on this level? What's happened that sex isn't sacred? The way we make ourselves, the way we connect with life and godhood and goddesshood. What's it all about? We have to make those decisions because this is a real crucial time. One of the things the Pleiadians said recently, they said, you know, you have the opportunity to change anything you want during the nanosecond. Miracles can happen. The future has unlimited possibilities because the future already exists. And it exists by your imagination and the things you think of. And you can end up in any future you want. Which one are you energizing to reel you in? So we have to get really clear. You can call it clearing the chakras. You can call it, you know, getting in your body. There's lots of terms for it. But one of the things I learned is that life gets easier if we get honest with ourselves. Just the way it goes. It gets real easy when there's just no more, you know, tricks, no more fogs, no more pretending. It just gets real easy. Everything flows. And then that's part of the spiritual initiation. And I believe as we prepare ourselves, just like our body is a temple, as we prepare ourselves to really integrate the energy in our own personal flavor. I told you a few examples of my life. That's not the way to do it, it's just my experience. And each of you has a story. You can apply what I'm saying to your own life and your own story. And then see, how have you initiated yourself? What have you done with your own temple, and where have you gone in the temple of consciousness? Because as we prepare this, then when all these things do happen, and they will, oh, they will, there's stuff coming down that's really, really remarkable, like exciting. There's a lot of difficulty coming too. Astrologically, the next 2 years could be really, really, really rough on food, water, jobs, health. This is Saturn in Virgo. And you have to have a strong immune system. No one's going to save you. You have to build your immune system yourself, and basically you can do a lot with your mind. I'm into simple, easy techniques, not, spend all your money on getting well. It's feeling well inside, having balanced emotions, and then doing the things that are important, alkalining your body, getting good sleep, relaxing, and spending plenty of time in nature. The more time you spend in nature, either working in the garden, digging holes, planting trees, walking, hiking, swimming, without any electronics, no entertainment, you'll find that your brain waves will entrain much easier, and you'll be clear. And that's a way to health, and nature's going to help us get there. We're also in a time of tremendous innovation and massive reality shock. I think that some of the things that were said between yesterday and today are all indicating this from different points of research and points of view. It means that society will be destabilized. Another clue, Pluto is moving into Capricorn till 2026, I think. At first it'll be very difficult because the global elite, or those in power, will attempt to control every aspect of our life, every aspect. And we will be saying a few months from now, by the spring equinox, where'd all this stuff come from? It's like, how did they write the Patriarch overnight? Well, they didn't. 9/11 was a setup. Just like everything in history's been a setup. It's nothing new, that's history. And how does this stuff happen? How do we get fleeced over and over again? How do good people get taken advantage of over and over again? I'll tell you, it's real simple. Because we're afraid to know. We're afraid to know. We're afraid to say the emperor doesn't have any clothes. We're afraid to psychically reach out. Why? Because guess what? There's probably not a person in here who doesn't have somewhere in their bloodline memory, okay, ancestral memory, or reincarnational experience, where they haven't seen someone or been experienced themselves where we were penalized, tortured, killed in horrible ways for saying, but this isn't how it is. Okay, and we know, what controlled us. It was usually religions, which are basically custodial organizations, controlling our spirituality. So we're breaking out of all this, We're breaking out of all of it. Everyone's breaking open their head in some way or another. And again, make agreements. It's your responsibility to make an agreement. So I can trust my body. Dear body, I love you. My body's going to be fine. I'm always in the right place at the right time. I process all events very easily. I know that anything that is going on in my body is a message, and if I get the message, then my body does not have to act that dis-ease or discomfort out anymore. This is a way that many of us think, that many of us live. And I would like to see more and more people join into that place of empowerment where we really own our physical forms. Because from what I'm saying, when I look at a little bit at politics, I've never voted in my life, and I never will, more than likely. There's nothing worth voting for. Because everyone on one level or another is part of the game. They're all compromised. I don't care how good we think they are. They all know something they're not talking about. Because they're afraid if they talk about it, then they'll be killed or they'll be marginalized. All that's going to break open by energy. Because when Pluto goes through Capricorn, it's going to destroy the power structure of the planet. So we're looking at new government rising. So is the New World Order, organized from so long ago to see where we're going to build the container for this breakdown of national structures? Could be, could be. But we have our own organic, homegrown version of what's coming. And it's not just about replacing structures. It's about energy and consciousness. And we're going to see what it's like to walk people over more. It's going to be our duty to walk people over. Just like it's our duty to make sure we get kids to the safe place and hold their hand and take them there. It's our duty to do these things. And if we're willing to see, and if we're willing to know even the hard stuff, then there's big gifts that come with it. And I think that's where we're moving. So that's my perspective.